for taking the time to be here during South by on a Friday evening. Um,
Yeah.
it's really cool to have you here. You are a graphics engineer at Arkane Studios, and I know that some of your talk is going to touch on what a graphics engineer does, but if there's anything else related to your introduction that you'd like to sort of kick us off with, feel free to take it away.
I don't know. You're asking some hard questions already, honestly. Introductions, I'm not that great at, but I'll try my best. Let's see. Hi, I'm Rahul. I'm from India. I'm a graphics programmer. I came to the US about 5 years ago now, almost. And so far, it's been a wonderful country and a wonderful place to be in. And as Elizabeth already mentioned some parts about me, I started working for Arkane about almost a year and a half ago now. It's been what? I complete 2 years in another 2 months, and it's been amazing working for Arkane, one of the best game studios out there. They make AAA titles. Some of you may or may not have played their titles like Dishonored, Prey, Deathloop. So let's start by talking about what I do as a graphics engineer, just a little bit, um, and how I got into it. Because when we play video games, the first thing we see and we get captivated by are visuals. And that's how I got captivated into video games too, which was after a while I decided to go into graphics. And well, my drawing skills were not that great. And working on them did not improve them all that much either. So I decided I've been around computers long enough. I understand math well enough. So I'm going to try to pursue a different route, which was more geared towards programming. And I decided to become a graphics programmer eventually when I started doing graphics work as part of my college studies. And that's how I became a graphics programmer, pretty much just because I like the problem space and everything a lot. Plus, you get that visual feedback of like, okay, this is what I'm looking at, and this is what the problem is. So it helps a lot. As for how I got into games, my dad used to have a computer back home since 1990s, and I used to game on those. So I've been around computer games since early childhood, and after by the time I reached undergrad, it was more about just I like computers enough, so I feel I want to do something in computers, but I was not sure what I really want to do in computers. By the time I graduated, I was playing a whole lot of Destiny, a whole lot of Warframe, a whole lot of other games. So I thought if I can play so many games, I can also be somebody who makes these games. And then I started looking up courses and how I can become a game developer. Then I found out about the grad school, SMU Guildhall, Full Sail, and whatnot. I found out about SMU's reputation, talked with their alumni, and felt maybe I should go to SMU to learn game development and game engine development. So I joined SMU, and at my time at SMU, we got to learn a lot. We got to learn about developing game engines, working on all sorts of parts of video games from audio to physics to gameplay programming to graphics, and it was crazy fun. It was amazing. It was an experience that I'm really grateful I decided to go through with. And during my time at Guildhall, I realized I like to solve the problems that come in this graphics land more, just because they give me that adrenaline rush where it's like, okay, damn, I solved a really, really hard problem and I feel amazing right now because sure, there is information on Google about a lot of problems, but there are not so much mentions of all the caveats associated with it, and you don't experience those caveats until you actually do it yourself. And getting through those caveats gives a feeling of happiness that is hard to describe until you experience it yourself.
Well, so I'm I'm really curious about a lot of what you just mentioned, but maybe one place to start is what specifically like a graphics engineer does. How it sounds like you're really heavy in the code, but you're also touching graphics ends of things. I wonder if you can just describe more of that role.
Yes. So the way I like to think of graphics personally is there are multiple parts to graphics itself. One is the engine part where there's a really low level programmer who would be dealing with API and engine level backend support that a whole lot of people don't really see, but it needs to be really good for all the other stuff to really work well. Then there is a middle level layer, which I like to think of as people who interact with artists, designers. They'll come up to you and be like, hey, I want the light to look like this, or I want my reflections to look like this, or developing developing features like reflections, how glass should look, how light should look, and just working on those things at a high level and giving them enough control knobs for them to be able to play around with those numbers and values to control. I'm sure at this point, you guys must have used Unity Engine or Unreal Engine for any of your classes.
Yeah, we're strictly in Unity for our course.
So in Unity, if you have used any sort of lights or like placing tile maps or whatnot, so developing those systems on the back end at an engine level is what a graphics programmer does, combined with other engineers like tools engineers and whatnot, depending on how much responsibilities they want to share.
That's really cool. That it just clicked for me, like what level you're coming in on there. And so you're working with tools engineers, you said, to like.
Yes, I'm working with the tools engineers, and there are all sorts of systems. So depending on the system you're touching, it can even be depending on like you need to deal with network engineers. You may need to deal with gameplay engineers. So you deal with all sorts of people in the entire team. So far, within 1.5 years, I've worked with lighting artists, VFX artists, tech designers, level designers, tools programmers, gameplay programmers.
Yeah, that's nuts. It sounds like you're kind of like a hub for a lot of different people who need things from
Yes.
yeah, the engine and the graphics. That's really cool. You were doing gameplay programming before, is that right?
No,
That was
that was more as a part of experience associated with Guildhall itself. But
okay.
professionally, I have only worked as a graphics programmer.
Okay. What was the experience at Guildhall doing gameplay programming?
It was nice. Gameplay has its own challenges for sure, but I did not feel the same rush I feel when I do graphics. And a third level of graphics is a really high level of graphics, which is because everybody wants to see next gen graphics, right? With all this new ray traced and fancy features, somebody needs to work on those. And I like to think of a high level graphics as someone who can be siloed for 8 months and he's just working on this entirely new tech that nobody has seen, or just this really cool feature that's just came out and it's state of the art and we need this in our game, let's say.
Yeah, that sounds. You're right that like yeah, graphics are the first thing that people like latch onto when thinking about games, and so I don't know, you're sort of on the front lines of making sure that the game is as like polished and beautiful as it can be for audience.
We are not like it seems like that way, but it's not entirely true either, because we are the support system to the actual team who's going to turn on and control all the knobs to make it look as best as possible.
Right. So you facilitate them doing it, but still,
Yes.
like you make it possible for them to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a team effort at the end of the day. As far as Guildhall goes, the program is really well structured. You have these team development games which are at first you start like an indie studio, so you make games in a four-person team, and they do it like a proper studio culture, almost like how industry operates. In your second semester, you kind of form the entire cohort is one single team, so you have like almost 60 people, and it's almost like a mid-sized, I know, double A studios, triple A studios that have about 70 or 80 people, so you're very close to that number, and you start experiencing certain challenges about communication and responsibilities and understanding of the scale that it needs to be taken when you have 70 people or 60 people in your team, right? And then as a capstone, you again become an indie team, but now with, because you have a different set of skill sets that you have developed over a year now, there are different levels of expectations from a capstone project. You are now no longer 50 people either, but you're not like a small siloed team of four people either. It's more somewhere in the middle of that, about 12 to 15 people. And other than that, you have personal classes, and the professors have all been industry veterans. Uh, Squirrel is really famous. He has given GDC talks for almost 20 years. He teaches math and programming there. And one of our professors was Doug, and he was one of the prototyping engineers of HoloLens. He had worked on HoloLens for 10 years. So people at Guildhall, all faculties, they have a rule which is faculties need to have at least 10 years of industry experience or something like that. So they are all industry veterans, and they know what they're teaching you and what the industry requirement is.
It sounds like a really cool program that like allows you
It
to build up
it
your skills
it
over
is,
time.
it's like a trade school where like people in industry are teaching you. There are other trade schools too, like there is Noman in LA, but it's more famous for art.
Right. Is Guildhall famous for like specifically a programming bent?
It's in general famous at this point because it's one of the first courses that was ever out in terms of game development. It's been almost 15 years now. They have a wide established network of alumni who have, a lot of them have started their own companies at this point. A lot of them are leads or principal programmers. Because if you think about it, a course that started in 2004 or 5 would have almost 20 years now. So
Yeah, that's nuts. It's cool to have that kind of like yeah structure and very early on.
it
And
was actually started by industry professionals. So it was originally started by people from aid, and all these people came together and they were like, we want to start a course at a college so that we can nurture the next generation of talents continuously in a more, in a better way, at least I would say. So they have all sorts of industry connections. People come in all the time. You get to talk to industry people, and you understand what the expectations are very quickly as you get out.
that sounds incredible. Nate, were you gonna jump in there? I saw you on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I kind of wish that our program did that. Like we wait like basically a year and a half before we actually get put in teams to work on games.
It's different because standard grad schools and MBA programs have classes like, I think, 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And there are elective classes that you can take, but that program itself is not like that. It feels almost like you're still in undergrad when you have like classes all the way from 8:30 in the morning to 5:30 in the evening, all 5 days of the week. So it's very intensive that way.
And is it was it 2 years long or just
It
1 year?
was, it's 2 years long, and you still have summer school too. So
Oh my God, that is incredibly intensive to be doing, yeah, like 8 to 5 classes and in addition to like projects that you're working on with teams.
with teams, and then you get personal assignments too from your personal classes.
Oh my God. But I mean, what Nate said is true. I do like, so everyone who's in this call, for the most part, or at least a lot of us, were in our last year, and we're just for the first time getting the chance to like work on a project on a team, and like there's a certain amount of like development that has to be for first time people doing this, like spent getting the hang of doing it and working on a team and what the like allocation of like responsibilities are. And so I don't know, it just sounds really amazing that Guildhall gave you the opportunity to sort of like learn those skills at the same time so that by the end at your capstone, when you're working on something that's on a bigger team, you already are sharp with what it means to like work on a team in that capacity.
Yes, and I realized after doing this at Guildhall, especially because their goal is to get you to have two shipped titles, and it's not like they'll just let you ship just
Wow.
because you're doing it. They have certain standards and requirements that you need to meet to get your title to ship to, which is applicable to the entire team. So everybody needs to pull their weight, everybody needs to get to that polished level and make sure that things are where professors are like stakeholders, like directors at a studio, where things need to reach at a particular polished level.
That's nice.
Otherwise, it won't get approved for ship.
Well, so did
And
you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
and this was the biggest thing. I realized that until undergrad I used to do a lot of competitive coding like ICPC, Code Chef, Hacker Earth, where and we start developing this until we start working in teams. We have a slight competitive feeling with each other that I want to do like I want my project to be best kind of thing. But when you start working in a team, you need to understand this, that you're a team player now. Sure, you can put in 2 hours more to make your thing look perfect and the best. But if you're a team player, then somebody who's struggling, you can help them out and bring their 40% to 80%. At the end of the day, in the industry, you need to be a team player. If you're not a good team player, then it hurts the team more than it helps you alone.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense to also like learn that through the structure of Guildhall. I'm curious about the two shipped titles thing. Like, so when you graduated from Guildhall, did you were you able to ship two titles?
Yes, they are
Oh,
both on Steam.
that's awesome.
Mhm. So uh, the team in general, because it's a 60-person game, the title which we work on usually during the second semester is a split screen arcade racing game, kind of like Mario Kart. And right now, every year you'll see, like, if you follow SMU Guildhall themselves on Steam, they keep publishing new titles every 6 months or so. So you get to find out what all the latest stuff people out there are coming up with.
It's really cool that they push students to ship because like on any job application for the industry, it's like must have at least. I mean, I think they say like three ship titles, but like that's sort of part of the curriculum at Guildhall, and it really prepares you and sets you up for success getting into the industry. I'm curious if you feel like that was like pretty helpful for you in landing your first industry role outside of school.
It does to a certain extent for sure, because you understand all the challenges that come with working in the team, right? Whereas if you were just working by yourself, then you can be the most amazing person in terms of skills. But if you cannot communicate yourself well enough, then that's a whole different challenge. It's not just about finding a person. It, it depends on a company culture too. If the company culture is, I want robots and I just want people to work for me, and everybody's just siloed, think about a dystopian movie. But that's not what games are. That's not where software industry is now. Most places have open floor space, open office space. It's sure you have your cubicles, but they're open cubicles. It's not like closed dystopian cubicles anymore. People like to talk to each other if possible. Sure, the whole COVID thing kind of punted that a little bit, but like in the general world, people talk to each other, people come up to each other and just ask. But if I was to hire robots who can just get things done for me, then, but that's not what we want, right? We are humans at the end of the day, and I like to think humans are social animals to a certain degree, even the most introverted people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And it's cool that it sounds like at Arcane that there's a lot of like interdisciplinary communication and I mean and you're saying this about games too, just in general, that you need to be a team player and
Yeah, you need to be a team player in general. It's not just about games. If you think about it, it's about pretty much applicable to any industry.
totally. Um, so was your first role outside of Guildhall Arcane? Am I understanding that right?
Yes,
Okay.
my first rollout of Guildhall was Arcane, and Guildhall has another thing which is their thesis, and their thesis is something you work on for close to 9 months officially, on a 9 months to a year. And it really honestly just depends on how much time you can spend on it. I spent, I think, like close to 400 hours or something on my thesis. And it's like I'm really passionate about this one particular thing, and I want to take it to the limits. And it's like if I can turn the sun on and off on a switch, I'm gonna crank the sun all the way up to 5,000.
This wasn't the arcade split screen thing that you were talking about before.
No,
No.
my thesis is multi-threaded rendering on CPU. So I wanted to explore this thing. Like we have heard all these things about threads and cores and whatnot since forever. Multitasking, multiprocessing, multi-threading. When we go to buy a new laptop, they're like, this has 32 cores, this can support this many threads and whatnot. And I was like, okay, I've heard about this long enough, but I actually want to explore this, what it is, and see how much I can crank the knob all the way to the top of all the systems that I can get access to.
I'm looking at our lead programmer, Nate, who's in the call. He's our lead programmer on one of the capstone games, and I'm curious like how that resonates with him. Your thesis project.
I did. Uh, there are things like affinity, thread priorities, thread groups, and you can do all sorts of experiments with them. Like be like, oh, I don't care that Windows is running. I want you to say like my game is the highest priority thing. I don't even care about the input. Like this is the only thing. So I came at a situation where the only way I could close my app was hard boot the system because it was such a high priority application that I had to like then tweak the code to turn it down a bit so that I can actually close the application. So you can, so like, sure, we are trying to push the limits, but you need to hold yourself back a little bit to at times. It's not like we are just going to take everything from the user's system and just make sure it's like those videos in on YouTube where it's like, oh, the PC is just melting because of how much it has been cranked, and you have like 15,000 frames per second rendering.
We're
We're doing that for our capstone game, Nate.
no. Were you looking into like using that to like increase the power on top of like what the GPU is already doing, or?
No, my goal was just to see the limits of rendering I can do at the level my personal game engine was at. So everybody in the programming track at Guildhall has their own personal engines that we develop as part of the program. And after a while, because of all the classes, your personal engine starts taking different directions based on your personal interests. So by the end of Guildhall, everybody's personal engine, although we all have the same starting point, it's like a branching narrative, and we all end up in different endings.
Could you tell us about your engine, or like I mean, what were like some of the biggest differences that you saw?
My engine had a 3D particle system. It has support for directional shadows, spotlight shadows. Um, I had a really complicated multi-threading job system. When I say job system, think of it like the task manager or a scheduler through which you tell and delegate work on other cores and threads.
Hmm.
I had support for Xbox controller vibrations. So it depends on person to person. I had a friend who did VR, so he had support for VR devices. Another friend had really cool audio stuff going for himself. So everybody has their own thing.
Yeah. Um, I'm kind of curious. Do you feel? I mean, you kind of hear over and over again that degrees are not necessarily the best way into this field. Do you feel like your degree was like uh, a big part of why you got your step into the door?
I will not entirely agree on or disagree on that front because I also come in as an international here.
Hmm.
So coming through an educational background and a STEM course for sure helps me much more significantly than working from India directly for for a company and trying to come over. But I would also say like I've met people in the industry. I've met one of my friend's coworkers. He was a baker until a few months ago. Yeah, and it's just all about putting in effort. And the thing I like to personally say is why tell when you can show? So part of a good portfolio is I don't need to tell, I don't need to talk about it too much if I can demonstrate it.
Hmm.
Like if I say I did this really cool thing, how would you know I really did this cool thing if I cannot show it?
Hmm.
It's like you're just talking about it, but I would like to see it.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're just spouting things at people like that, like employers are also just going to get lost in it. It's kind of just word soup.
Yes. So it helps when you have something very demonstrative on a portfolio for sure. It also helps that if you have something to offer with more latest tech, because you may not uh, you may not fully understand it. Our job is not to always fully understand everything. It's a journey. We will keep learning. Learning is a lifelong process in every industry. If you think about lawyers, they got to keep learning new laws. As a software developer, we got to learn new languages, new algorithms. A doctor needs to learn new operation techniques or whatever. So learning is part of life, and it's all about how much effort you are willing to put in to learn and to get there.
I'm curious if you're able to talk about at all what projects you're working on at Arkane right now, um, and what that like work-life balance is like if you guys are in super deep production mode. Yeah.
Work life balance at Arcane is amazing. I, you guys know about Redfall. Redfall is about to launch, and here I am going to South by Southwest. So, just saying,
No, that's really good news, actually.
it's a wonderful place. I love working with all my coworkers. I got no comps, honestly. So, work life balance is great, and it also depends on person to person. I have other friends in the industry, and I'll say it honestly depends on you at the end of the day as to what your personality and what your personal goals are. I I don't like to rush things. I'm personally of the mentality that Some people become CEOs at age of 20 and they retire at 40. Some people become CEOs at age of 60 and retire at 80. Everybody has their own pace in life at to what they work on, what their goals are. Some get to their goals faster than others, some get to it slower than others. It's all good. Rather than thinking about what you don't have or where you want to be, think about what you have and just appreciate it.
No, I think that it's helpful to think about that as people who want to get into the industry and who are working hard toward that goal, but also knowing that, like, I don't know, that there's a right time for that to happen, and just continuing to enjoy what we do should be part of that experience of breaking into the industry, just as much as like landing a particular role. Um, it is really good to hear that even close to launch date, you know, you guys aren't crunching super hard at Arkane. I'm curious if there were any parts in the project that like required you to, like, if you guys have had to do crunch at all.
I,
I don't
I'll,
know if you can speak to that.
I'll ask you first question. What do you think crunch is?
I'll say 80-hour work weeks. That's how I'm
Uh,
imagining it.
that's not a good way to put it, I feel. We do what we do out of passion, first thing. So, there are two types of crunch that I like to think about it. One is mandated crunch, like everybody needs to crunch because we need to get this thing out of the door. We don't do that, period. There is the second type of crunch, which is self crunch, which is you volunteer for it, and we don't appreciate that either. Be a healthy person, do your job. A couple of hours, today you worked a couple of hours less, tomorrow you worked a couple of hours more. That's on you. Nobody's going to question you on those really too much. Because it's also about you're passionate, you're on a roll, you're like, oh, damn, I'm making some really good progress. So I'm going to, do these three other things and just try my luck here too, because things are just going really well for me right now. And there are days when you're just down in the dumps and you're like, it's like, oh, let's just today is just not working out. Maybe I'll just leave right now. So there are all sorts of days also, and I I really have no opinion personally on crunch, and I don't think we crunch at all at Arcane or Zenimax for that matter, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I mean, Rich, one of our professors, he worked there for like 10 years. I think that speaks to the kind of culture that Arcane has in wanting their employees to take care of themselves.
Average tenure at Zenimax Studios is about 12 years, and it automatically speaks volumes, and people are primarily there for the culture.
And you guys make really great games too. So,
That too. See, when the
um,
culture is great, when people are happy, products automatically, when your employees are happy, your products start becoming great automatically.
totally. I know that you wrote this in your email, but I'm curious what a typical workday looks like for you in your current role.
I wonder if I want to make this joke right now. Maybe I should not. uh, it's amazing in the sense that we get a little bit of flexible hours and we get fixed hours so that people know that these are the times where we are going to be available at all times. So there are called core hours and flexible hours. And the best part is every day, because like you can have things going, you're a regular human being. So sometimes you can come in at I come in at sometimes at 9, sometimes I'm a little late and I come in at like 9:30, and because of these a couple of hours of flexibility allows me to manage things in the morning or in the evening for that matter. In terms of other work culture, day-to-day work life, it's just, well, it's very simple depending on what features get requested, what tasks get requested. Talking with my manager, who's the tech lead, to see whether we want to change the order of things. If something blocks me, then getting my producer to possibly find out who I can talk to about getting my blockers removed, or talking to people who requested the features, discuss out what their requirements are for the features. Maybe I have a different picture or they have a different picture. So it's always nice to first clear out all the things with a good communicated meeting. And then it's just standard programming, and Nate knows what that's like. And probably other people in the meeting, I hope.
Definitely. I think
I will say this, it's not about talent, knowledge, or experience. Knowledge and experience builds over time. I used to think that way too before I joined the industry, before I came to Gilol. Like every time you talk to somebody, it will feel like that at all times. That thing never goes away. But I think a good engineer is just somebody who's really, really obstinate. There's this one problem that I care about right now, and it just bugs me, and I'm gonna think about it in the back burner or something. You're just obstinate in your own ways, like you care because you care. So you totally get what I'm saying, and that just helps build on to the experience, because you other people see the end product, but you're the one who has to deal with all the caveats and the ins and outs of it. So it gets you there. And once you're done, you feel that excitement, that rush that I was talking about earlier.
are there particular goals that you have for yourself in the industry? Are there places that you want to go? Do you want to, like, I don't know, go into managing people at some point, like go the lead route, or stay more like hands in
Definitely
code?
like to be tech director at some point in my life. As to how I'll get there, I don't think that far ahead in my life. I do one day at a time, maybe a couple of weeks at best. Because
That's fair.
life is unexpected. You think you want to do something, and suddenly you'll decide to make a turn that you would have not expected to make.
Totally. Well, I think there's some questions in the chat. This is from like a long time ago, but someone said, which Warframe was your go-to?
Oh, damn. I really used to love Limbo because I would just stay in Limbo and annoy a lot of people, or Limbo other people. Uh, Trinity, until they nerfed that health build where you could self heal and just do DPS damage. It was great. Oh boy, I haven't played it in a while. It was not healthy the way I used to play. There was a point in my life where I was playing like, I think 12 to 14 hours of Warframe on any day I would have free. Sometimes even like I've had like 20-hour sessions of the Warframe. It was not a good, which is why I held back, and now every time a new update comes, I log in for like a week or something.
If other people have questions, feel free to type them in the QA events chat. I'm curious as, oh, you go ahead.
It has, and I cannot tell you all the details, but there have been times where you try to Google something and you're like, huh, this is not helpful at all. Gee, thanks, girl. And after a while, you just give up looking at things and you just go all the way from zero, just go through actual physical books and just start all the way from scratch pretty much. And it's very amazing and impressive in its own way. It for sure takes time, but it is what it is, I guess. I honestly don't know that, and I think that's a general, I'll say, I personally feel that's a general problem in software industry, not just games. Like lack of documentation is a thing. And it honestly cannot be covered unless like everybody is just going on Twitch and recording themselves 24/7. Because there are so many caveats that you deal with constantly. There are sometimes things that you do in a such unconventional ways that it's like it breaks all convention, but it makes sense in only one particular instance. It's like if any of you have taken AP chemistry, it's like, or AP biology, it's like mammals cannot fly, but bats can fly.
Yeah, where there's pretty much one exception to every single rule about what mammals can't do.
Yep, and that's kind of that 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 those exceptions are what you start dealing with in your programming points or your career, any career software design. And like there's like, oh, like we do 10 things this way, but we need this particular thing for just this particular mission because we would like to do it this way, and that's an exception. And suddenly you have like so many exceptions lying around all over the place that they become so hard to track that it's not really feasible to document everything either.
Mm-hmm.
And there is the thing of whole intellectual property right and everything, so people want to, it needs to be ensured. There are a lot of channels, a lot of legalities, litigious. We live in a litigious society. There are legal requirements on a lot of things.
Yeah, and even stuff that does get documented, oftentimes it doesn't stay in date.
That is that is also a visible problem you'll see in general in software industry, I'll say.
Yeah. We have a couple more questions here. Do you ever receive payments from those games that you published at Guildhall?
They are student projects. They are not for sale. They are free to play, so you don't get any sort of royalties from them. It
Okay.
is by design that way because if you think about it, SMU themselves have a stake in it. Their reputation is attached to it. There are professors who have been industry professionals who have industry reputation, so they have a stake attached to it. There are a lot of stakeholders, and sure, they are nice about it. You're allowed to get rights to it. Your team is allowed to get rights to those games, and then you can figure out how you do whatever you do with it. But there's a whole legal procedure to it, and it's non-trivial.
Hmm. We have another question here, which is, do you ever have to redo textures or graphical effects, or do you just move on to the next item? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes here.
I don't follow. Can you repeat the question?
Uh, do you ever have to redo work that you've previously done, like an effect that you've like sent off to the rest of your team?
Oh yeah, all the time. Bugs exist. Like I said, there would be that one exception, and for that one exception, you start building a lot more exceptions, and suddenly you have like 10 exceptions in place, and something exception will start interfering with the other exception, and then you start building more exceptions to segregate those exceptions, and it's a whole rabbit hole at that point.
Yeah. Does other people's like other graphics programmers' work often get tossed to you after there's an issue with their work, or do you guys try to stay segmented?
The way I will say it the way every industry professional says it, because I've never thought about it that way. I just like to think I'm a graphics engineer. Whatever work comes my way, comes my way. Like, this is now my work. Because if I think about it, when I joined the team, I had joined the team. I did not know what I was gonna work on or anything for that matter. So, and let's say if I leave the team right now, there is work that needs to be done by somebody, whatever work may be on me, complete or incomplete. So a good way to think about it is that I am in this role, and every system is partially, if I'm the only one, it's my responsibility. If there are other people with me in this team in this role, then we all share responsibility equally, irrespective of whether it's their work or my work.
Okay. We got one more. Can you use the same concept on a game you worked on that's published through Guildhall for, say, your own studio? Or is that a kind of IP or is that kind of IP locked up with Guildhall? So nice ideas here, and I wonder if there's copyright issues that can appear if you, say, wanted to make a sequel for one of these.
Yes, that would be a problem. You cannot make a sequel with the same name and just call it 2 or 3 or 4 for that matter. There are, that's the part of legalities I was talking about, that there is an intellectual property copyright involved there, and you would have to go through with your teammates to get those. They are pretty cool about it. Usually it goes through, I know teams in the past have gotten theirs. If we wanted to publish our personal projects like that we do individually too, we need to get rights from the professor. They need to sign off on it and stuff. And one of my friends during my cohort wanted to publish one of his personal projects on itch, which he got rights for, and he was able to. So it's it's doable. It's not that hard. It's just a matter of, but when you're in a team, it's like, oh, I need to convince not just myself, I need to convince these 12 other people. And then there is the whole issue of they need to sign off on royalty sharing or whatever if they don't want to further be a part of it.
Hmm.
So it gets tricky.
Well, I have a last question, which is to a bunch of people who are currently in school, trying to break into the industry afterward. What is one piece of advice that you wish you had heard when you were at this point in your career? And what do you think would be helpful for us to keep in mind?
I would I would say the same thing that that people suggested to me. I think some of those helped a lot. There are networking events, and it's great to take that first step to network with people. Those networking events are not about, hey, I'm here for a job. It's just about, hey, I want to know what people in the industry are like, what they like to do. I like to. It's just making that human connection with somebody. There was that. Other than that, don't worry if you get rejections. Before I got my first job, I had a whole lot of rejections too. But it's about interviews, and going through the process of interviews is also a learning experience, in my opinion. So if you are able to find out and you are able to do retrospects after every interviews, after every test to see where you went wrong, where you think you went wrong. You have professors, you have people who can potentially help you out. Then it's great because now you know what you can change, what where you might be going wrong, and just that constant retrospective helps a lot. And like I said, don't be afraid of rejections. One of my friends and my old roommate, he got his he got job after 126 rejections. So
126?
yes,
Oh, it's resilience.
yes. So just be that resilient person and be like, yes, I don't care, I just care about getting a job. And each interview is also, retrospect is important in the sense that if you are being rejected, that means you're not up to their standard. You may be up to somebody else's standard, but what can you do to improve your standard so that your chances are better at whatever place you apply next, is a good way to think about it. That's most of what I got in terms of interviews, I'll say.
And it's good to think about, like, just here in Austin, we have such a strong, like, community of game devs who are down to share their wisdom and hold meetups. I don't know if you go to any of, like, the, what is it, like, game dev beer night, stuff like that.
I do every once in a while. I went to the last one that happened recently, I think last week.
Cool. Yeah. It's just, it's amazing to live in a place where there are so many people who are willing to help out, and uh, including people like yourself stopping by to talk to the club about what you do. And yeah, we really appreciate you
I
coming.
love helping new talent come up because I feel like that's how humanity has grown. Somebody needs to teach somebody so that the next generation of people that come in get better and better and better. And that's how we have evolved for thousands of years, right?
Yeah,
By observing others or learning from others, directly or indirectly.
I was just reading the QA to see if there was anything else. Um, if not, Rahul, we'd love to have you stick in the server. If you are down to, maybe people can continue to ask you questions if things come up.
I don't mind staying in the server. People would probably have to DM me because usually most of my servers are just on 24/7 mute.
Yeah, no,
I
that's
lurk around depending on what information I might be looking for.
yeah, that makes sense. Well, cool. It's awesome to know that you might be available to people if they have questions, especially about things like graphics engineering or just general like industry questions. Um, and just want to say thank you so much for your time. It really is cool, your philosophy about helping train the next like generation of people who are going to be making games and helping like pass that knowledge on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody who came to hear me on a Friday night here. And I hope I get to see you all soon in Redfall.
I'll be there. I don't know about, I think Nate will be there.
Wow. 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 Wow.
Okay, Nate, take it back.
No backsies.
Well, cool. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, especially Raul. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your night. Everyone will be still on the server. And feel free to ask questions if anything comes up. And I hope you guys have a good weekend and a great South by you're doing.
Have a great weekend, y'all. Bye bye.
Thanks. Take care.